All right, so here we want to start sewing the black trouser. So here the first thing you need to do is to fix your pocket. Now I have made other videos on this initially, but I just want to show you guys how to do this as well. So you cut your lining. The lining is 14 by 14, and make sure that before you start fixing, you must have gummed. Let me show you where I gummed so you understand better off. I gummed the pocket. I have other videos I've made on how to gum and prepare your outfit, so you can use that same video and do your gumming. Then the lining you have brought out is 14 by 14. Now you take one edge and place your panel in this form, and then you cut that particular point. So once you stitch that particular point, then you cut out the underneath lining, which is very, very important. So for this, you can do this as well before you sew or you stitch. So cut it as well, and then here is what you have. And then you fold inward just like this, just the same way I'm folding. Please make sure you maintain the same folding or whatever I'm doing here. Then stitch quarter of an inch all through that way, and then cut your threads. Make sure that everything is properly arranged. Then the next you will do is to stop stitch this all down to the main body of the lining. So open up the allowance as you can see, just this way. Then you stitch here, you stitch there all through this way, stitch all through this way. So because of the fact that we have the serviette edge at the edge of the fabric, so we don't need to fold or weave. But if you don't have a serviette edge, just make sure you weave that particular spot. So here you bring the pocket facing, and then you have two options, either to weave or to fold. Then place it at the end of the other lining. Now start from there to start folding your fabric in this form. Fold, and then you stitch. Make sure you stitch all around this way. Gently do this, don't be in a haste. Stitch all right round. Fold all through this way and stitch. Stitch all right round. And then after you have done this, now you cut your threads as well. You cut your threads. So the next you will do here is to fold the lining backwards in this form, and then you start from here. You now stitch all through. Start from here and you stitch all through. So I made a video on how to cut this outfit. I will try to drop the link to that video in the description box of this particular video, so that you get to understand the cutting and the sewing processes as well. So here you trim the excesses of the pocketing, trim all through, and then after which, what you do next now is to tuck it in. Once you tuck it in, you bring out the edges properly that way, and then make sure the edges are properly brought out. Then you top stitch the base. The top stitching helps the pocket to reinforce so that it can carry a heavy or a bit sharp object inside the pocketing. So top stitch all through this way. Make sure everything is properly aligning. Top stitch all through that way. Top stitch all through that way. And then after which, the next you will do is cut your threads. Cut your threads. Cut your threads. And then you now lock the pocket edges just like this, making sure you align all of this way. So this will be here, and then you now top stitch this part half an inch inwards, just that way. Top stitch it. Then you cut your threads. Cut your threads. After which, you now lock the up parts of your pocket just by flinging it around that way, and make sure you measure from that point. Must be 2.5. You measure from there, and then you stitch down. You stitch it down. You sew it down. So once I've sewn that part, you can now cut out the excesses just this way. So this is how you fix your front pocket. So do the same thing on the other side. I will do that, and then I'll come back to show the results. After you have sewn the other pocket, the next thing we do now is to fix the linings. Now the linings also as well was cut by the width of the pleat of the trouser, but then it has a pleat at the middle. So this pleating is optional though. You can see decide to cut equally or can say cut with the pleat. But the pleat is going to be ideal if you have issues in cutting exact size of any fabric so that it will not shrink or compress the trouser material. You stitch all through this way. Make sure you stitch all along this point. This is how you stitch a lining, half an inch or one quarter inch rather, all through. Then stitch to this part. So make sure where you're stitching from, you can close it from the locking of the measurement when you start applying the measurements. Don't stitch more than one quarter of an inch, and then you stitch the back part, that the sideways, just trying to make sure everything is aligning. And then because of Jonkoso fabric I am using, there is a way you have to systematically stitch the lining so that it won't give you issues. Stitch the up part first from the pocket point, sew it first so that it can lap, and then you can now stitch it downwards from the end of that point. In making Jonkoso trouser, you have to be patient enough and also be calculative enough so that you don't make mistakes or have any issues. So you place it all through this way, and then you stitch down to the very point. So here I have done this, so I will do the next one and I will come back to show you the results. So here we want to start fixing the zip. We have weaved the trouser. Now this is a flap. Just fold one of the flaps into two, and then bring your zip and then place your zip in this form. So this is a simpler way, or another way as well, you can fix your zip. Then stitch at the end of the zip just like you have seen, or you are seeing, just like this, and then cut out the threads, cut the flap this way. Then you're going to bring the panel of the trouser, the front panel. So you're picking the left panel, and then you place the other flap, the one that does not have the zip, the straight part of the flap, place it from there, and then just stitch from the very end of this flap, making sure that the both flap and the zip are corresponding. So, and make sure that the length of the flap is a bit longer than the trouser panel. Stitch all through to this point. Cut your thread, and then turn it over this way. Then top stitch this. The top stitching is very important. So make sure that all you have sewn is being pushed towards the flap region, the one under. After which, cut your threads, cut the flap in this form, cut your thread as well, cut your threads as well, and then you bring the right panel, you now measure the zip point, that is 7.25, notch half an inch there. Then place that zip part, the one you have already stitched the zip on, place it down, make sure that the zip is facing down, and then start from here to stitch, making sure that your stitching is ending or closing the older line. You get like the first line you have sewn, so you must cover the old line. Cut your threads always, and this is what you have. So at this point, you top stitch from here. The top stitching is very important as well, so that it helps to the fabrics to relax properly without encroaching on the men trouser bodies. So stitch all through that way. And also note that where I stitched it from was also notched, right? Don't forget. Stitch all through that way, and then cut your threads. Then bring the other panel of the trouser, the one that has the flap and then place it on top this way, making sure that it's aligning all through from here. Place on top that way, and then arrange the panels carefully. Then start from the crotch point to start sewing. So this stitching now is also going to end at that notched area. So make sure that you are holding the panels to align. So you open it up that way and get to that notched point, and you stop there. Please don't exceed that notched area or that notched point. You cut your threads, then double thread it. It's advisable that you double thread because it helps to reinforce the trouser. And double threading should be on top of the first thread or very close enough. Double thread. After which, make sure that this part is corresponding. The flap of the trouser must lap the flap of the trouser, right? So once you have gotten to that point, you raise it up just like this, and then stitch the zip down. Make sure that it's corresponding here. Then stitch the zip down. Stitch the zip down all through this way. So once you have sewn that zip area down, you now cut your threads, and then make sure everything is properly arranged. So here, let me explain something very important here. If you want to get a perfect finishing, make sure that this trouser, that's the one that has the zip, is lapping 1/4 inch in bigger or wider than this one, right? That's this one here. It should not be exact. You see that it's a half 1/4 inch wider than this one, so that it can cover the zip when you turn it over. Please note that this should not tally with the main panel. Please watch. So this part should be bigger than this is the other panel of trouser. It should be bigger by 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch. Then let's proceed. Then once you have gotten to that point, you arrange the panels properly, and then you hold the flap region and stitch, measure 1.3, 1.5 maximum, and stitch down. So making sure that this area is also balanced. So you bend the underneath flap, make sure it's balanced as well, and then stitch all through that way. Then once you get to that point where the zip ended, then you make your curve. Your curve should also lap properly. You are going to shift your flap and then do this in this form, stitch properly, and then cut your threads. Cut your threads. Cut your threads. You zip. So afterwards, you now lock the two flaps together, just like 1 inch stitch. This helps you to hold it down, just this way. Cut your thread, cut your thread, and then this is what we have. So here now we have finished the zip fixing. So the next to do now is to join the sides. The next thing you are going to do here now is to mark for your loop, opening of the loop. So from the flap or from the measurement of the zip fly, you mark 1.5 inches in. That's the opening for the first one. The second one, from that 1.5, you mark 4.5. That's the balance point where your rope should come out from. That's from the edge of this zip here. You mark 1.5 inch inwards for the first opening. Then from here, mark 4.5 backwards here for the second opening of the rope. So now we have gotten to that point. Now the next we are going to do now is to trim our band. Now this band trimming we are doing is to enable us have a perfect fixing. So you already know that the band measurement is 4.5 inches width. Now you are going to cut the length only on the front panel waist measurement. You're not going to cut the back. Remember that the back already has the band cut together with the back panel. So the band measurement is 4.5 inches width, but the length of your waist circumference divided by 2, you cut it only for the front panel. Then here we have gotten the band. Then we want to now create the opening of the hole. We have already folded gum with our gum stem, and then we are going to create a hole here now. So please watch attentively and see how this opening will be created. So this is one of the best ways you can do this. Then fold it all through this way, and then stitch half an inch or quarter of an inch from there. Stitch, and then once you get to the midpoint of where you know your hole will come out from your band, then you're going to skip, double stitch there, then use glue stitch and skip. And once you exceed to a point where you also sure that you accommodate your hole, you tighten your stitch and then stitch back the rest with a perfect stitch. You know, you can also skip the stitch in there, and then here you slit this point. You slit this point, slit this point. So once you have gotten that slitting done, then you flat press it this way, and then you now make sure you position it on that same point where you already marked for your opening. Then stitch from the band. In some cases as well, you can top stitch that edge if you want. So you stitch all through that way, stitch all down, then stitch it down, sew it down. Make sure it's perfect like this. Sew it down, and then after this, you cut off the excesses here, and this is what you have. So we are going to rip off that place that we used to stitch to sew. But before we do that, let's first of all close the band edge properly. So fold it backwards this way and make sure it's balancing or aligning. And then you stitch from here and make sure it ends at that same point where your flap ended. Then you carefully give half an inch and cut off, then notch out the edge, cut off your threads, cut your threads just this way, and then tuck it outwards. Use your scissors to bring out the edges properly so it comes out in this form. And then this is what you have. This is what you have. So this is where you have your band. So you now make sure you place this one as well to make sure you mark this to get the exact point where the band is, so that you don't have a longer or a shorter band on the different panels. You hold it properly. Do the same thing you did on the first band. The same thing you did. Fold it this way and then stitch it down, half an inch down. Then also give a gap where you bring out the rope from. So that gap you are giving there is necessary. You must bring out the rope from there. So you stitch it all through this way, and then you slit as well. You slit as well. So once you have slitted, the next you also do is to also match it with that same point where your chalking is, where you have already programmed your loop to come out from, your rope to come out from. So you make sure you get to this point, stitch all down, stitch all down, stitch all down. So this is what you have. Cut your threads, cut your threads, and make sure that everything is nicely arranged. Cut your threads. So now we have achieved this part. So the next you do is to lock the band as well. So just fold it this way and then stitch down, stitch down. So stitch down. So once you have done this, you cut off the excesses, cut it out. Cut it out. Tuck this out just like this. And then this is what we have. Then cut the excess of the band at the back panel. So the next we are going to do now is to join the back panel first before we lock the band. Bear in mind that the band of the back panel was cut together with the front panel, right? So you are meant to join the band together first before you can think about locking the band. So here you bring the back panel, place this way, then open up the front band this way and join from the beginning, so that this will help you to give you a guide where you also fold the back panel from as well. So you stitch all down. So you make sure everything is properly arranged. Stitch all down this way. Join the sides. So of course you should also know how to do this before, but I just want to show you this so that in case you don't have not joined, if this is the first time of watching, please make sure you watch the very end before you practice your own. So you get to this point, you sew all through down the side panels of this trouser. So once you have joined this side, you're also going to join the other side as well. So I will do that and then I will come back to show you the results. Make sure you join in a way that none of the panels will be shorter or will be hanging. So you make sure you drag the legs to be equal. So you have to drag the leg to a point to be equal. So once the legs are equal in length, you don't have any problem whatsoever. So join to this very point. So I will do the same thing on the other side. I'll come back to show you the results. Here we want to open press. After you have joined the trouser, you must open press. So this I'm using here is called the ironing board and my steam iron. So you just need to place it on this form and then you iron. So make sure you do this. This helps your work to... Don't say, I will do it later after sewing. No, do it now while you are sewing. It's easier to do now than after sewing. Even though after sewing, you still do it again, but this is just better off you do the first pressing now. This pressing is very essential that every tailor must do it by themselves. You don't need to give it to a laundryman. Laundryman might not be able to do this for you effectively. So when you have open press all through that way, you also open press the band parts where you have that opening line. Make sure it's relaxed. And then you now use that front panel to fold the band. Now you're going to do as if you're refolding. Now taking bearing from the front panel, you now fold the band to enter the back panel area as well. So this is how it's done. So make sure it's what you are going to do. Take bearing from the front width and then you fold the back just as you are seeing. You first of all get the real folding first, and then you fold like this and then tuck it in just this way. So this is the easiest way you can do this and achieve a better result. Make sure the band folding is equal and straight as possible. So once you have gotten to this stage, this is what you are going to have. So do the same thing you are doing here on the other side as well, and then you continue the sewing, which I will do and come back to show you the results. So here now we have gotten the folding. So the next we are going to merge is the band. So merge the band in this form and then make sure you lock with 1 inch or half of an inch. Remember that the back has elastic, so you don't need to apply the waist or whatever measurement on the waist region. Just use 1 inch or half an inch and lock the band. making sure that the lines you iron are corresponding as well. So iron the band in this form, and stitch the back panel of the trouser in this one as well. So stitch all through to the very point. So this is how you stitch the back. Then you cut your threads. Cut your threads. Then you are made to double stitch the back panel. The double stitching will help to reinforce the back waistline should be firm, so that it won't pull off or tear easily. So once you have stitched all through that way, this is what you have. Then cut your threads, cut your threads, cut your threads, cut your threads. So this is how the back panel will look like. And the next you do now is to merge the center panel, and then you bring your elastic, 1 inch elastic. This is called 1 inch elastic. So you bring the elastic, 1 inch elastic. Please, it must be 1 inch elastic. Don't use any other inch. So you take the half part of the back panel from the center joining to the side of the trouser. Take the half part just this way. So measure it from there, and then cut your band, cut your elastic right there, and then you bring your rope. So the rope must be a corresponding color or a matching color, right? So you bring your rope and then you cut out. So the length of the rope is dependent on the waistline you have, but don't make the rope to be too long. So this rope could be 12 to 13 inches long each, right? And then you place the band, you place the elastic down, place the rope on top at the side joining. Please note where I'm placing it from. At the side joining. At the side joining. Then stitch it properly. Stitch it neatly. Make sure the stitching is as neat as possible. Then cut your threads. Cut your threads. Should be neat as possible. And then you will stretch it. You will stretch the rope, the elastic, to the other end of the trouser. You also place your rope on top, just this way, and then you stitch it as well. You stitch it down nicely as well, like 3 to 4 times. So once you have sewn that point, you also cut your threads. You cut your threads. Cut your threads. So the next you do now will be to, open up that point where you have used loose stitch to sew or to hold. So you bring your seam ripper. You bring your seam ripper. Remember that I told you guys you use loose stitch to hold there. So you bring your seam ripper and rip off the parts where it was sewn loosely, and then push the head of the rope to come out from there. Do the same thing on the other side as well. Use your seam ripper as well to loose up that point. It was a loose stitch at that point. Then push the rope head to enter properly, and then you drag it out just like this. So once you are done with it, the next you will do now will be to lock the band and to lock the underleg of the trouser. So let's start the locking process as well. So on the band locking, you make sure you stitch at the hole where the joining of the band meets with the trouser panel. So stitch inside that particular hole and make sure it's inside of it. Make sure it's inside of it. Or rather, you can still top stitch in most cases as well. So you can top stitch. So this is the stitching of the closing parts. So you top stitch all through that way. Top stitch all through that way. And make sure that when you are getting to the back panel of the trouser, the stitching of your band. So you make sure as well you hold, when you get to the elastic part, you have to hold it firmly, stitch down. I know this is the way most of us we have challenges on, but then let's just know that this is as easy as ABCD. So you have to push the rubber inwards as well, making sure that the elastic is being covered. So stitch all through. So make sure you push it in. Don't allow the first stitching now to touch the elastic. So make sure you push it in and then cover with the folding. Cover with the folding properly. So you take your time to do this. Cover with the folding properly. And then go all the way down. Go all the way down. So this first sewing, it's not advisable that the elastic should be sewn on top yet, because you are yet to lock the trouser, right? So all you need to do is to make sure that every foldings and every part of the trouser is properly arranged. Don't stitch on the elastic yet. Just lock the main trouser first. So just stitch on there. Just stitch on there. Stitch all through that way. So you have to be dragging it this way so that you get an exact fitting or exact relaxation of the fabric you want. So you must make sure you tuck it in. Make sure you tuck it in. It's squeezing because I'm locking the last part of the elastic, right? But I'm not sewing on the top of the rubber yet. The rubber is on its own for now. I will still sew on top of it at the second stitching. So this is how it's done. So stitch and enter the front panel of the other side as well. Lock it as well all through to the very end, and make sure that everything is just coming out nicely, just the way you are seeing. So lock all through this way. Lock all through to the very end. After this now, I will show you as well how to double thread the elastic points at the back of the trouser. So this is how it is. See, the rubber is working, right? So I'm here to double thread it. So you now start from that same side joining and then stitch at the midpoint. So while sewing this, you must make sure that you stretch the fabric. You must stretch the fabric. So drag it down. Drag it down. You must stretch the fabric just this way. So as you stretch it, it becomes elastic. It becomes straight. Then when you sew, the elasticity comes back. So this is how it's done. This is how it's done. You see, it's giving you that boxer's effect at the back waistline. Then end it at that point where it ended. And after which, you now use 1/2 inch to lock the leg of the trouser, because this is a very free trouser. You don't need to apply measurements anymore. Your knee, your ankle, your lap, everything has been considered when you are cutting. So just use 1/2 inch to lock the end of the trouser. So I do hope you enjoyed the video. Ask your questions and I will also make sure I answer. So please watch this video to the very end before you start attempting yours, right? This is very important that you need to watch the very end. So you use half an inch to lock all the parts of the trouser. Half an inch and lock every part of the trouser. Half an inch and lock every part of the trouser. So this is how it is. So lock every part of the trouser. Lock all through. Lock all through. Lock all through. Then the last part now will be hemming or folding. So which I believe you can do that as well. See you guys on the next one. Bye bye for now. So here I'm trying to show you the compressing. So you also compress the leg parts of the trouser as well. You know, everything about metal is ironing. So you have to also be patient enough while doing this, or compress everything. You know, Jonkoso likes steam iron. Please don't use your dry cell iron to do this. Try and get a steam iron, even if it's a small one. The one I'm using is a tool iron. It has a tank at the up this way. So you also, you know, iron the hip back crotch area. This just helps your work to be nice, right? So iron all through. So this is how it should be. This is called ironing board. So you must have this as well, or you can get a carpenter to get you something of this nature, or you can buy online, anyone. Then this is how it is. So the next you will do now will be ironing the trouser properly, and then that's all. Thanks for watching. See you next one. Bye bye for now.